this is a subject that is of great meaning to me, and also is a subject that I think you guys are the best people to talk to about, because you guys are the ones who so often could incorporate myth, legend, fairy tale into your work. And so I am currently working on a book for which researching this topic is kind of one of my main areas of research. And the book is about, broadly speaking, kind of how thinking about those older semi-oral, semi-written genres can help us understand social media and the new genres of writing and thinking that happen through new media, which paradoxically, even though it's all written, recorded, has a lot of the qualities of much older literatures. And in part, I'm very eager to teach this seminar, to lead this seminar because of this research. But in another sense, I'm also extremely eager to lead it because as I was saying to some of you in the room, like, this is the one subject of my research that my 12-year-old, my 8-year-old are actually excited about. And I have long been fascinated by that, because myths and fairy tales and legends, they're often not child-friendly. They often don't seem like they would appeal to children, or by contrast, they don't seem like they would appeal to adults, but they do. And part of what I would like to explore and just talk to you about in this seminar is their broad appeal, what makes them memorable, what makes them travel, how they travel, and how they exist and have existed all over the world. So there are two aims of this seminar as I see it. The first one is kind of broad coverage. We all know some fairy tales and some folk tales and some myths, but very often our knowledge of them is restricted to where we grew up, what our parents read to us, what our school teachers read to us. And for my book, I've been researching kind of very broad global primary sources, and I am going to hope to introduce you to some of them. So we will be reading West African tales, including particularly Yoruba tales, which is my kind of area of local expertise, the Mayan creation myth, the Popol Vuh, the long narrative poems of the Haida tribes of the North Pacific, Jain legends from medieval India, fairy tales from China, Japan, Russia, from Central Europe, including Yiddish, Jewish fairy tales, as well as the better known ones like Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the Grimms, Hans Christian Andersen. So on the one hand, I hope that at the end of the seminar, you're going to come out of it with a sheaf of new tales that you might be able to introduce as you see fit, just to vary your curriculum. But I also hope, and this is the second part of the project, I hope that you're going to come out with new questions about them and also new reasons why you might think they're interesting to teach. And here every week, every week we're going to dive into a new region. We're also going to dive into a new set of kind of conceptual or pedagogical questions. And I'm not going to list all of them to you here because there's a lot, but I'm just going to give you a preview of what I have in mind. So one of the ways in which my 12-year-old knows a lot about Greek mythology is Percy Jackson. And mythology is interesting and unlike, say, the novel or the poem, in that so much of what is cool about it, its essence, survives in retelling and repositioning. Kind of, I wouldn't tell my children to read, say, like Madame Bovary, set in contemporary London, but I had no qualms about finding out that my 12-year-old knows about the Laestrygonians because she read this book. So as we approach in one of our first weeks, Ovid's Metamorphoses, one of the kind of great Roman compendia of Greek and Roman myths, alongside some of the Percy Jackson that my daughter says she's going to help me select. We're going to think about, what does it mean for a myth to have an original? Does it? Why do they exist in variants? Why is the variant an interesting quality of this kind of literature? Another thing we're going to talk about, and here the Brothers Grimm are unparalleled, is our fairy tales for children as they were originally written. Here we're going to think with the research of scholars who have dug up and written about so-called original versions of fairy tales. I mean, you're not going to be able to sleep at night after you read the original Sleeping Beauty. But then we're also going to look at how they were gradually rewritten in different centuries to correspond to what people thought was appropriate and interesting to children. And we're going to think about those acts of rewriting and how we might ourselves engage in them in our practice and what we think they mean, why we do this. And like, how does censoring a fairy tale make it age appropriate somehow, if the original content was potentially brutal, violent, etc. We're also going to talk about the term orature. Orature, which means oral practice of storytelling, poetry, recitation. It's not literature because it's not written. And most myths, fairy tales, have their origin in oral tales, which are then eventually written down. Here we're going to talk about the Haida storytellers' written down versions of their epics, about which there's much controversy over how you write them down. Should you write them down? Whose version do you write down? We're also going to think about qualities of oral poetry in general and oral storytelling. How is it different from composing a written text? And what can we learn from it, for example, for our own writing or the teaching of writing? When we study Russian fairy tales, we're also going to study a little fragment of one of the great texts of the kind of syntactical analysis of fairy tales. So what elements does a fairy tale have? Protagonist, antagonist. What are the plot twists? Why are there always 3 trials? So this is a book that helps us get a conceptual vocabulary. Oh, please come in. For when you introduce a fairy tale to students, what are easy terms you can give them to parse it? When we study Yiddish folktales, we're going to study them in relation to a book of kind of early 20th century sociology that tries to figure out, like, what are the social uses of tales? I mean, obviously there are performances of tales, but also we tell each other proverbs to teach each other stuff, or to establish an in-group and an out-group. That's what a riddle is about. So we're going to place fairy tales, legends, myths within that context to consider their larger social purpose. So this is my teaser. You're going to get more if you come to the seminar. And I am very open to suggestions if there are regions you would like represented that are not on the initial syllabus. I have a whole shelf full. I can give you more. And I'm just eager to talk about this because, again, I feel that I will be in the presence of experts coming to it from a different angle than I do. And I'm just really looking forward to the conversations. Thank you.